Hey friend, have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible? Have you ever been so hurt that silence became your only language? Have you ever been surrounded by people, but still felt completely alone? This isn't just a story about silence. It's a story about what happens when silence becomes survival, and what it can teach us when the noise of the world disappears. Because sometimes, when you stop talking, you finally start hearing what your soul's been trying to say all along. His name was Micah Lane, not the loud one in the group, not the guy who told jokes or crushed presentations. Micah was the shadow, 27 years old, wore gray hoodies, avoided eye contact, always had headphones on, even if nothing was playing. To most people, he was the weird one, the loner, the guy who never spoke unless you spoke first, and even then, barely. But what no one knew was that Micah hadn't spoken a full sentence in over 3 years. Not out of rebellion, not for attention, but because some wounds don't scream, they go quiet. It started after the accident. Micah had been a youth counselor at a local shelter, the kind that helped at-risk teens. He was good at it, not because he talked well, but because he listened like their pain mattered. But one night he got a call. A 17-year-old girl he had mentored, Aaliyah, had taken her life. Micah froze. He went to the funeral, sat in the back, watched her mother collapse onto the casket, and then he just stopped talking. Words felt empty. Advice felt fake. The world, too loud and cruel. People around him didn't understand. They gave him space at first. Then they gave up. Family stopped calling. Friends stopped asking. Even his therapist eventually said, "You need to want to heal." But that was the thing. He didn't want to heal. He wanted answers. Why didn't he see the signs? Why did the world allow people like Aaliyah to fall through the cracks? Why did silence seem safer than pretending to be okay? So he chose it, day after day. Micah worked night shifts at a 24-hour gas station. Minimal human contact. No pressure to perform. Just coffee machines, quiet radios, and blinking fluorescent lights. In the little time he wasn't working, he walked. Miles and miles through the city. Past apartment buildings, over bridges, through alleyways where kids like Aaliyah used to sit. Sometimes he scribbled in notebooks, wrote questions, wrote memories, wrote apologies, but never spoke. It was raining the night that changed everything. Micah was walking home, hoodie soaked, when he saw a boy, maybe 13, sitting alone on the steps of a closed library. No umbrella, no phone, just hugging his knees. Micah kept walking, then stopped. He didn't know why. Maybe because he'd seen too many kids like that vanish into the system. Or maybe because something in him recognized that kind of silence. He turned back, sat down 5 feet away, said nothing. The boy looked over, surprised. Micah just nodded. They sat like that for over an hour. No talking, no judgment, just the sound of rain and pain breathing side by side. Eventually, a woman, the boy's mom, came running down the street sobbing. She found him, clutched him, thanked Micah over and over. Still, he said nothing. But as she led the boy away, the kid looked back and whispered, "Thank you." Micah sat there alone, soaked, shaking, and cried for the first time in years. Micah didn't start talking the next day, but something shifted. He started journaling again, this time with purpose. Page after page, not just about Aaliyah, but about silence, about grief, about how many people live in invisible pain because they've been told it's too heavy to share. Then one day, he submitted an essay anonymously to an online trauma forum. It was titled, "The Year I Stopped Speaking and the Moment I Was Finally Heard." It went viral within a week. Not because it was flashy, but because it was true. Messages poured in. People saying things like, "I've been silent for 10 years. I didn't know someone else felt this way. This saved me. No one ever put it into words before. Please write more." So he did, still silent in public. But on paper, Micah's voice grew louder. He started a blog called The Quiet Ones Speak, filled with essays about trauma, grief, loneliness, and the quiet power of observation. Publishers reached out. Podcast hosts asked him to appear, He declined the voice interviews, but wrote responses they could read aloud. And then one day, he got an email from a university. A professor of behavioral psychology had read every post. She wrote, "Your silence is the most powerful dialogue I've ever studied. Would you consider speaking, or even just appearing, at our symposium on trauma response?" Micah didn't know what to say, or if he could say anything at all. But he showed up, not on stage. He sat in the back. Then, during the final panel, the professor asked him to join them up front, even if just to sit there and be seen. Micah walked slowly to the table. The room was silent. He sat, and after a moment, he leaned toward the mic. Everyone held their breath. And for the first time in 1,112 days, he spoke. "I'm not here to give answers. I'm just here to remind you that sometimes the loudest cries make no sound at all." The room erupted in tears, and then applause. Not thunderous, but deep, reverent, like people weren't clapping for a man who survived silence, but for the part of themselves that wanted to believe they could too. Micah speaks now, not often, but with intention. He teaches workshops on trauma-informed listening. He helps therapists train for nonverbal grief response. He even volunteers at shelters again. But he never forgot what those 3 years taught him, that not everyone who's quiet is okay. That sometimes the strongest people say nothing because they've had everything taken from them before. That words can be weapons or lifelines. So if you know someone who's silent, don't force them to speak. Sit beside them. Breathe with them. Be the space their pain doesn't have to justify itself in. Because some of the most powerful healing doesn't come from being fixed. Comes from being felt. What part of Micah's story stayed with you? Have you ever been silent? Not because you didn't have something to say, but because the world didn't make space to hear it? Comment below. Tag someone who needs the story. And remember, just because someone isn't talking, doesn't mean they aren't screaming inside. Listen harder.